The palace corridors gleamed under the morning sun as servants rushed about their daily duties. Princess Camilla stood by her chamber window, watching the gardens below with distant eyes. She had lived in this castle her entire 23 years, yet lately it felt more like a prison than a home. Her father, King Theodore, had recently announced her engagement to Prince Marcus of the neighboring kingdom. The arrangement was political, beneficial for both realms, but utterly devoid of love. Camilla pressed her palm against the cold glass. She thought of the life she truly wanted, the freedom she craved. Since childhood, she had been trained in royal etiquette, taught to smile gracefully, speak diplomatically, and never reveal her true feelings. But her heart belonged elsewhere, to someone completely unsuitable in her father's eyes. She heard footsteps approaching her door and quickly composed herself. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, entered with fresh linens. The older woman had served the royal family for decades and knew Camilla better than anyone. Margaret noticed the sadness in the princess's eyes immediately. "Your Highness, you look troubled this morning," Margaret said gently, placing the linens on a chair. Camilla turned from the window. "I'm perfectly fine, Margaret." Just lost in thought, Margaret approached carefully. "It's about the engagement, isn't it? You don't love Prince Marcus." Camilla's facade cracked slightly. "Love was never part of the arrangement. I'm a princess. My duty is to my kingdom, not my heart." "But your heart matters too," Margaret whispered. "I've seen how you look when you return from your evening walks in the gardens." "There's someone, isn't there?" Camilla's cheeks flushed. She had been so careful, so discreet. "I don't know what you mean." Margaret smiled knowingly. "I've been around long enough to recognize love, Your Highness. And I've noticed certain patterns. Your walks always follow the same route. You return with flowers that don't grow in our gardens. And there's a lightness in your step that wasn't there before." Camilla sat down heavily on her bed. The weight of her secret felt crushing. "If my father discovers the truth, it will destroy everything. Not just for me, but for him too." "Who is he?" Margaret asked softly. Camilla hesitated, then decided to trust the woman who had been like a mother to her. "His name is Thomas. He's a scholar from the village working in the royal library. We met 6 months ago when I was searching for books on philosophy. He didn't know who I was at first. I wore simple clothes and didn't announce my title. We just talked about books, ideas, life. For the first time, someone saw me as Camilla, not as Princess Camilla." Margaret sat beside her. "And you fell in love?" "Desperately," Camilla admitted. "He's kind, intelligent, and he makes me laugh. When I'm with him, I feel alive. But it's impossible. He's a commoner with no title, no wealth, no political value. My father would never approve." "Does Thomas know you're the princess?" Camilla nodded. "I told him after a month. I couldn't keep lying to him. He was shocked, of course, but it didn't change how he felt about me. We've been meeting secretly in the old garden behind the library. It's overgrown and abandoned. Nobody goes there anymore." Margaret took Camilla's hand. "Your Highness, secrets like this rarely stay hidden in a place like this. The palace has eyes and ears everywhere. If you're not careful, someone will discover the truth." "I know," Camilla whispered, "but I can't give him up, not yet. The wedding to Prince Marcus is still 3 months away. I just want these last few weeks to have something real, something that's mine." Margaret looked worried. "The royal guards patrol every inch of these grounds. Captain Edmund is especially vigilant. He takes his duty very seriously." Camilla felt a chill. Captain Edmund had been her father's most trusted guard for years. He was loyal, efficient, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to royal security and protocol. If anyone would discover her secret, it would be him. "I've been careful," Camilla insisted. "I only go during the evening when the guards change shifts. There's a 15-minute window when that section of the garden is unwatched." "And Thomas? Where does he go afterward?" "He has a small room near the library. He's working on translating ancient texts for the royal collection. My father actually commissioned the work. Not knowing Thomas means anything to me." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Be careful, my dear. The closer you get to the wedding date, the more suspicious everyone will become. Prince Marcus arrives in 2 weeks to begin the formal courtship period. The entire palace will be on high alert." Camilla felt tears forming. "I don't know how I'll survive this. I don't love Marcus. I barely know him. But I love Thomas with everything I am. Have you thought about what you'll do? Will you go through with the wedding?" Camilla stood and walked back to the window. "I don't have a choice. If I refuse, it could cause a diplomatic crisis. My father has worked years to establish peace with Marcus's kingdom. My personal happiness doesn't compare to the welfare of thousands of people. But you're suffering, Margaret said. Many people suffer, Camilla replied. At least I got to experience real love, even if only briefly. Some people never have that. Margaret rose to leave, but paused at the door. Your Highness, if you need anything at all, I'm here. And please be more careful. I have a bad feeling about all this. After Margaret left, Camilla returned to her preparations for the day. She had lessons with her etiquette instructor, then meetings about wedding preparations, followed by a formal dinner with visiting dignitaries. Her life was scheduled down to the minute, with no room for spontaneity or joy. But tonight, during the evening guard's shift change, she would steal away to the old garden. She would see Thomas, feel his arms around her, and pretend for just a little while that she was an ordinary woman in love with an ordinary man. She would pretend that duty and obligation didn't exist, that she could choose her own path. As she dressed for the day ahead, Camilla caught sight of herself in the mirror. She wore the finest silks, jewels in her hair, the picture of royal perfection, but inside her heart was breaking. She wondered how long she could maintain this double life, how long before everything came crashing down. What Camilla didn't know was that her secret was already in danger. Captain Edmund had noticed irregularities in the guard rotations. Someone had been exploiting the shift changes, and in a palace where security was paramount, such matters demanded investigation. The captain had quietly assigned additional guards to monitor the unused sections of the palace grounds. It was only a matter of time before they discovered who was breaking protocol and why. The Royal Library was a massive structure filled with thousands of books and ancient manuscripts. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating particles of dust that danced in the air. Thomas sat at a wooden desk, carefully translating Latin text into the common language. His fingers were stained with ink, and his eyes showed the strain of hours spent studying tiny, faded writing. He was 25 years old, the son of a village bookkeeper. His father had taught him to read at a young age, and Thomas had shown exceptional talent for languages. A traveling scholar had noticed his abilities and helped him gain entrance to the university in the capital. After years of study, Thomas had earned recognition as one of the finest translators in the kingdom. When King Theodore commissioned someone to translate the palace's collection of ancient texts, Thomas's mentor had recommended him. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to work with documents most scholars never got to see. Thomas had accepted immediately, moving into modest quarters near the library and beginning his work. He had been at the palace for 8 months now. The first 2 months had been lonely. He knew no one, spoke to no one except the head librarian, and spent his days surrounded by books written by people long dead. Then one afternoon everything changed. A young woman had entered the library, dressed in simple clothes, her hair tied back plainly. She approached his desk and asked about philosophy books. Thomas directed her to the proper section, and they began talking about various philosophers and their ideas. She was intelligent, well-read, and had opinions that challenged his own thinking. They talked for hours that day. When she left, Thomas realized he hadn't even asked her name. He hoped she would return, and she did the very next week. Their conversations continued, growing deeper and more personal. She told him her name was Camilla. He told her about his work, his dreams of one day writing his own philosophical treatises. After a month of these meetings, she revealed the truth. She was Princess Camilla, heir to the throne. Thomas had been shocked, then terrified. He had been speaking so casually to royalty, treating her as an equal, even disagreeing with her opinions. He apologized profusely, but she stopped him. "I don't want apologies," she had said. "I want you to keep treating me like you have been. Like I'm just Camilla. Not a title, not a crown, just a person." Their friendship deepened into something more. Thomas knew it was dangerous and impossible. He was a commoner with nothing to offer a princess except his heart. But Camilla insisted that was enough, at least for now. They began meeting in secret in the abandoned garden where no one went. Thomas lived in constant fear of discovery. Every time they met, he worried it would be their last. He knew about her engagement to Prince Marcus. Camilla had told him about it, tears streaming down her face. They both knew their relationship had an expiration date, but neither wanted to face it. Now, sitting in the library, Thomas tried to focus on his translation work. The text was about ancient Roman law, dry and technical. His mind kept wandering to Camilla, to their planned meeting that evening. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 6 more hours until he could see her. The head librarian, Master Edwin, approached his desk. He was an elderly man who had served the palace for 40 years. "How is the translation progressing, Thomas?" "Well, Master Edwin, I should have this section completed by the end of the week." Edwin nodded approvingly. "Excellent. The king has been pleased with your work. He mentioned possibly extending your commission to include the Greek text as well." Thomas felt conflicted. More work meant more time at the palace, more time near Camilla. But it also meant prolonging the inevitable heartbreak. "That would be an honor, sir." "You've proven yourself quite valuable," Edwin continued. "The king rarely praises anyone, but he specifically mentioned the quality of your translations during last week's council meeting." After Edwin left, Thomas returned to his work. He thought about the strange position he found himself in. The king praised his professional work while being completely unaware that Thomas was in love with his daughter. The irony was almost painful. Thomas heard footsteps and looked up to see Captain Edmund entering the library. The captain was an intimidating figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. He wore the Royal Guard uniform with obvious pride, every button polished, every crease perfect. "Master Thomas," Edmund said formally, "I have some questions for you." Thomas's heart began racing. "Of course, Captain. How can I help you?" Edmund pulled up a chair and sat across from him. "You live in the quarters near the library, correct?" "Yes, sir. In the East Wing Servants Building." "And you've been working here for 8 months?" "Yes, sir." Edmund studied him carefully. "Have you noticed anything unusual during your time here? Anyone accessing areas they shouldn't? Any irregular activities?" Thomas forced himself to remain calm. "No, Captain. I mostly keep to the library and my quarters. I don't socialize much with the other staff. What about the gardens? Do you walk through them?" Thomas felt sweat forming on his brow. "Occasionally for fresh air." "Why do you ask?" "There have been some security concerns," Edmund said vaguely. "We're questioning everyone who has access to certain areas of the palace grounds. Have you ever been to the old garden behind the library?" Thomas's mouth went dry. "I may have wandered through there once or twice. It's quite overgrown. I didn't realize it was off limits." Edmund's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's not off limits, just unused." "When were you last there?" "I can't recall exactly. Several weeks ago, perhaps." The captain stood. "If you remember anything unusual or if you see anyone in areas they shouldn't be, report it to the guard immediately. Security is everyone's responsibility." "Of course, Captain." After Edmund left, Thomas's hands trembled as he tried to continue his work. The captain was clearly investigating something, and the questions about the old garden were too specific to be coincidental. Someone must have noticed their meetings, or at least noticed that someone was using that area. Thomas needed to warn Camilla. Their planned meeting that evening was now too dangerous. But how could he get a message to her? He couldn't simply walk into the royal chambers. He had no legitimate reason to contact her. He thought desperately for a solution. Margaret, Camilla's lady-in-waiting, sometimes came to the library to fetch books for the princess. If Thomas could find her and pass along a message, perhaps Camilla would get the warning in time. Thomas spent the rest of the afternoon anxiously watching for Margaret, but she didn't appear. As evening approached, he faced a terrible choice. Should he go to the garden to warn Camilla in person, risking being seen by whatever guards Edmund might have posted? Or should he stay away and hope that Camilla would sense the danger and not come? He decided he had to risk it. If Camilla went to the garden and he wasn't there to warn her, she might be discovered. He couldn't let that happen. Whatever happened to him didn't matter, but Camilla had to be protected. As the sun began setting, Thomas left the library and made his way carefully toward the old garden. He took an indirect route, staying in shadows, watching for guards. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. He had never been so frightened in his life, but love pushed him forward. What Thomas didn't know was that Captain Edmund had been watching him carefully for days. The captain had noticed small details. The way Thomas watched the clock as evening approached, the nervous glances toward certain windows, the ink-stained fingers that sometimes held flowers. Edmund was a man who noticed everything, and he had begun to suspect that the young scholar was involved in whatever was happening in the old garden. Tonight, Edmund had positioned guards strategically around that area, He would finally discover who was breaking protocol, and why. And if his growing suspicion was correct, the discovery would shake the palace to its foundations. King Theodore rose from his chair, his movement slow and deliberate. He walked to the window overlooking the palace grounds, his hands clasped behind his back. The silence stretched, and Camilla could see the tension in her father's shoulders. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" "I fell in love," Camilla replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is that truly a crime?" The king spun around, his face flushed with anger. "Love? You speak of love as if it's some simple thing, some feeling that justifies everything. You are not an ordinary girl, Camilla. You are a princess. Your life is not your own to live as you please." "Then what am I?" Camilla shot back, her own anger rising. "A piece on your political chessboard? A tool for making alliances? Don't I deserve any happiness?" "Happiness?" Theodore laughed bitterly. "I gave up my happiness the day I took the crown. Your mother gave up hers when she married me. This is the price of royalty, daughter. We sacrifice for our people." Captain Edmund stood quietly by the door, his face carefully neutral. He had served King Theodore long enough to know when to speak and when to remain silent. "Your engagement to Prince Marcus is in 2 weeks," Theodore continued. "Do you know what happens if this scandal becomes public? Marcus will withdraw. His kingdom will be insulted. The alliance we've spent 3 years building will crumble, and we'll be left vulnerable to our enemies." "Then let it crumble," Camilla said desperately. "Father, I don't love Marcus. I will never love him. You're sentencing me to a lifetime of misery for the sake of politics. And you would sentence thousands to possible war for the sake of your feelings?" Theodore demanded. "What about the farmers who depend on trade with Marcus's kingdom? The merchants? The soldiers who won't have to fight if we remain allied? Are their lives worth less than your romantic fantasies?" The words stung because Camilla knew there was truth in them. She had spent months trying to reconcile her personal desires with her royal duties, and she had found no solution that satisfied both. "What will you do to Thomas?" she asked quietly. Theodore returned to his desk and sat heavily. "That depends. Tell me everything. How did this start? How long has it been going on? What exactly is the nature of your relationship with this man?" Camilla took a breath and told him everything. She explained how they met in the library, how their conversations grew into friendship and then love. She described their meetings in the old garden, emphasizing that their relationship had remained proper, that they had done nothing shameful beyond meeting in secret. "He never pursued me inappropriately," Camilla insisted. "He never took advantage. If anything, I pursued him. When he learned I was the princess, he wanted to stop seeing me. I convinced him to continue. So he knew who you were and continued anyway," Theodore said coldly. "That shows poor judgment at best, manipulation at worst." "It shows he's human," Camilla replied. "It shows he cares about me, not my title." Captain Edmund finally spoke. "Your Majesty, if I may, I've investigated the young man. Thomas Reed, age 25, scholar and translator. His record is spotless. No debts, no scandals, no criminal history. He's respected by his mentor and by Master Edwin at the library. His translations have been excellent." "I don't care if he's a saint," Theodore snapped. "He had no right to involve himself with my daughter." "With respect, sir," Edmund continued carefully, "they're both adults, and from what I observed tonight, their affection seems genuine. The young man tried to take all the blame to protect the princess." Theodore studied his captain. "Are you defending him?" "I'm reporting facts, Your Majesty. You asked for the truth, and the truth is that this seems to be a genuine attachment between two people who knew their relationship was impossible, but couldn't resist it." The king rubbed his temples, looking suddenly exhausted. "What would you have me do, Edmund? Ignore it, bless their union? Throw away years of diplomatic work?" "I would have you consider your daughter's happiness," Edmund said quietly. "And I would have you remember that sometimes the heart doesn't follow duty, no matter how much we wish it would." Theodore looked at his captain in surprise. In 20 years of service, Edmund had never spoken so boldly about personal matters. "This doesn't sound like you, Captain. You're the most duty-bound man I know." Edmund's jaw tightened. "Perhaps I know too well the cost of putting duty above all else, Your Majesty." Camilla looked at Edmund with new understanding. She had always seen him as the embodiment of cold military discipline, but now she glimpsed something else in his eyes. Old pain, old regrets. Theodore was quiet for a long moment, then spoke decisively. Here's what will happen. The young man will be released and given funds to relocate to another city. He will never attempt to contact you again, Camilla, or he will face imprisonment. Is that clear? Father, please, it's far more generous than he deserves, Theodore interrupted. He could be charged with several offenses. I'm showing mercy by allowing him to leave freely. And what about me? Camilla asked. You will proceed with the engagement as planned. Prince Marcus will never hear of this incident. No one outside this room will know what happened tonight. You will marry him in 3 months, and you will be the gracious, dutiful wife that politics requires. Camilla felt something break inside her. So I'm to pretend none of this happened? Pretend I don't love someone else? Yes, Theodore said firmly. That's exactly what you'll do. Because you are a princess, and that is your duty. Tears rolled down Camilla's cheeks. I can't do it, Father. I can't marry someone I don't love while knowing Thomas is out there somewhere, alone and heartbroken because of me. You can, and you will, Theodore replied. Time will heal these wounds. In a year you'll barely remember his name. You're wrong, Camilla whispered. I'll remember him every day for the rest of my life. Theodore's expression softened slightly. I know this seems cruel, daughter, but I'm trying to protect you. A princess who married a commoner would be scorned by other royals. She would never be taken seriously. Her children would be looked down upon. I'm sparing you that pain. You're sparing yourself embarrassment, Camilla said bitterly. The king flinched as if struck. Perhaps there's truth in that, but my decision stands. Captain Edmund, have the young man brought here. Edmund bowed and left the room. Camilla and her father sat in uncomfortable silence. She wanted to scream, to rage, to somehow make him understand, but she could see in his eyes that his mind was set. Minutes later, Edmund returned with Thomas, who was flanked by 2 guards. The young scholar looked disheveled and frightened. His eyes immediately found Camilla, and she saw the depth of his worry for her. Thomas Reed, Theodore addressed him formally. You stand accused of conducting an inappropriate relationship with Princess Camilla. What do you have to say? Thomas stood straighter. Your Majesty, I love your daughter. That is my only crime, and I will not apologize for it. Several people in the room drew sharp breaths at his boldness. One simply did not speak that way to the king. Theodore's eyes narrowed. You love her? And what exactly did you think would come of this love? Did you imagine I would hand you my kingdom? That you would ride off into the sunset together? I imagined nothing beyond the present moment, Thomas replied. I knew our relationship had no future, but I also knew that Camilla deserved to be loved for who she is, not what she represents. Someone had to see her as a person, not a political asset. How dare you presume to know what my daughter needs? Theodore said dangerously. I presume nothing, Your Majesty. She told me herself. She told me about feeling invisible, about being nothing more than a symbol. She wanted just once to be seen. Camilla's heart swelled with gratitude and sadness. Even now, facing the king's wrath, Thomas defended their relationship with truth and courage. Theodore studied the young man for a long moment. You have 2 choices, Thomas Reed. Leave this kingdom tonight with enough gold to start a new life elsewhere, never attempting to contact my daughter again, or refuse, and face charges that will land you in prison for years. Which do you choose? Thomas looked at Camilla, his eyes filled with love and sorrow. If I thought refusing would allow us to be together, I would refuse gladly. But I know it won't, so I'll leave, Your Majesty. Not because I fear prison, but because staying would only bring more pain to the woman I love. Camilla let out a sob. Thomas, no, please, he smiled sadly at her. It's okay, Camilla. You gave me 6 months of happiness I never thought possible. That's more than most people get in a lifetime. I'll carry those memories with me always. This isn't fair, Camilla cried. None of this is fair. Life rarely is, Thomas said gently. But we had something real. No one can take that away from us no matter how far apart we are. King Theodore stood. Captain Edmund, see that Thomas is provided with 100 gold pieces and safe passage to the border. Make arrangements for his departure within the hour. Yes, Your Majesty, Edmund replied. Thomas was led toward the door, but he stopped and turned back one final time. Your Highness, he said to Camilla, be strong. Live the life you must live, but never forget that you deserve to be happy, and somewhere out there I'll be remembering the woman who changed my entire world. Then he was gone, and Camilla felt as if her heart had been physically torn from her chest. She collapsed into. Princess Camilla endured the longest day of her life. The morning began with a 3-hour session with her etiquette instructor, Madame Rousseau, a stern French woman who corrected every gesture and word. Then came meetings with the wedding planner, where Camilla was forced to choose between flower arrangements and table settings for a celebration she dreaded. Lunch was a formal affair with her father and several advisors. King Theodore discussed trade agreements and military strategies, barely acknowledging his daughter's presence except to occasionally mention how pleased he was about the upcoming alliance with Prince Marcus's kingdom. Camilla smiled and nodded at the appropriate moments, playing her role perfectly while dying inside. After lunch, she had dress fittings for the engagement gala that would take place when Prince Marcus arrived. The seamstress pinned and tucked fabric while Camilla stood motionless, staring at herself in the mirror. The woman in the reflection looked like a stranger, a beautiful doll being prepared for display. Late afternoon brought the worst task of all, reading letters from Prince Marcus. Her father insisted she respond to his correspondence personally. Marcus wrote about his kingdom, his hobbies, his expectations for their marriage. His letters were polite but cold, written like business documents rather than messages between future spouses. There was no warmth, no curiosity about who she really was. She was simply part of a transaction. Camilla wrote careful responses, her handwriting elegant and her words diplomatic. She thanked him for his thoughtfulness and expressed enthusiasm for their coming union. Every word was a lie, but lies were expected of her. Finally, as evening approached, Camilla's official duties ended. She dismissed her attendants, claiming she needed rest. Margaret helped her change from her formal gown into simpler clothes, a plain dress that could pass for a servant's attire. "Are you certain you should go tonight?" Margaret asked quietly. "I have an uneasy feeling. I have to see him," Camilla replied. "I need to be reminded that something real exists in my life, even if only for an hour." Margaret helped her slip a cloak over her shoulders. "Then at least be extra careful. Take the servants' staircase, not the main corridors." Camilla hugged the older woman. "Thank you for everything, Margaret, for understanding." "Just come back safely," Margaret whispered. Camilla waited in her chambers until the guard shift change began. She had memorized the patterns over months of secret meetings. At exactly 8 o'clock, the evening guards replaced the afternoon shift. During the transition, there were precious minutes when certain areas went unwatched. It was a small gap in the palace's security, one she had discovered by careful observation. She left her chambers through a hidden servant's entrance, moving quickly down narrow hallways used by staff. These passages were plain and undecorated, designed for functionality rather than beauty. Camilla had learned every twist and turn, every shortcut. She emerged into a small courtyard, then crossed quickly into the garden paths. The sun had just set, leaving the sky painted in deep purples and oranges. Garden lights had not yet been lit, providing cover of darkness. Camilla pulled her hood up and kept to the shadows. Her heart beat faster as she approached the old garden. This abandoned section of the palace grounds had once been beautiful, but decades of neglect had turned it wild. Ivy covered stone walls, pathways disappeared under weeds, and flowers grew in chaotic tangles. But to Camilla, it was the most beautiful place in the world because it was where she could be herself. She slipped through a gap in the garden wall, entering their secret meeting place. A broken fountain stood at the center, its basin filled with rainwater and fallen leaves. Stone benches were scattered among the overgrowth. Moonlight filtered through the twisted branches of ancient trees. Camilla looked around but didn't see Thomas. She was early, arriving a few minutes before their usual meeting time. She sat on one of the benches and waited, pulling her cloak tighter against the evening chill. Minutes passed. The garden was silent except for the sound of night birds and rustling leaves. Camilla began to worry. Thomas was always punctual, often arriving before her. Where was he? Then she heard footsteps, but something was wrong. The steps were too heavy, too numerous. Multiple people were approaching. Camilla stood quickly, her heart racing. Had Thomas brought someone? Had something happened? Thomas burst through the garden entrance, his face pale and frightened. "Camilla, you have to leave! Now it's a trap!" Before she could respond, Captain Edmund stepped out from behind a wall, followed by 4 royal guards. More guards appeared from other directions, surrounding them completely. Torches were lit, flooding the garden with light. "Nobody move," Edmund commanded, his voice cold and authoritative. Camilla felt her blood turn to ice. This was her worst nightmare realized. She looked at Thomas, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with horror. Edmund approached them slowly, studying the scene. "Your Highness," he said, his tone hard to read, "I believe you are where you should not be." Camilla lifted her chin, trying to maintain dignity despite her terror. "Captain Edmund, I can explain, can you?" Edmund looked between her and Thomas. "Can you explain why the Crown Princess has been secretly meeting a commoner in a hidden garden? Can you explain why you've been violating security protocols and deceiving your father?" Thomas stepped forward. "Captain, please. The princess has done nothing wrong. I'm responsible. I pursued her. I arranged these meetings. Punish me, not her." "Noble," Edmund said dryly, "but unnecessary. The princess is not a child. She made her own choices." Camilla found her voice, forcing strength into it. "What happens now, Captain?" Edmund studied her for a long moment. "Now, Your Highness, you will return to your chambers. You will remain there under guard until the king decides your fate. As for you," he turned to Thomas, "you will be taken to the guardhouse for questioning." "No," Camilla cried. "Please, Captain. Thomas has done nothing illegal. We've only talked." "Just talked. There's no crime in conversation." "That may be true," Edmund replied, "but there are crimes in deception, in breaching security, in behavior unbecoming of a royal. And those decisions are not mine to make. The king will judge." Two guards moved toward Thomas. He didn't resist as they took his arms. His eyes met Camilla's across the garden, filled with sadness and apology. "I'm so sorry," Thomas whispered. "I should never have allowed this to happen. I should have been stronger." "Don't apologize for loving me," Camilla said, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't regret the only real thing in my life." Edmund gestured to his guards. "Take him away, gently. He's not a criminal, just a fool." As the guards led Thomas out of the garden, Camilla tried to follow, but Edmund blocked her path. "Your Highness, you must come with me. The king has been informed and wishes to see you immediately." Camilla felt her legs weaken. Her father knew. The one person she feared most in this situation now held all the cards. King Theodore was not a cruel man, but he was uncompromising when it came to duty and royal obligation. He would never understand love that defied political necessity. "Will Thomas be harmed?" she asked. "That depends on the king's judgment," Edmund replied. "But I will recommend leniency. Young men make mistakes, especially when beautiful princesses are involved." "He made no mistake," Camilla insisted. "He gave me happiness." "Is that wrong?" Edmund's expression softened slightly. "In your world, Your Highness, sometimes yes. Happiness is a luxury royals rarely afford." Two female guards arrived to escort Camilla back to the palace. As they walked through the gardens, Camilla noticed other guards posted everywhere, far more than usual. Edmund had clearly prepared this operation carefully, leaving nothing to chance. They entered the palace through a side entrance, avoiding main corridors where servants or courtiers might see the princess being escorted under guard. The walk to the king's study felt endless. Each step brought Camilla closer to a confrontation she had dreaded for months. The study doors loomed ahead, massive oak panels carved with royal crests. Guards stood on either side, their faces impassive. Captain Edmund knocked firmly, and a voice from within commanded them to enter. King Theodore sat behind his desk, his face grave. He was 50 years old, his beard showing streaks of gray, his eyes carrying the weight of decades of rule. He looked at his daughter with an expression that broke her heart, disappointment mixed with anger and sadness. "Leave us," he commanded the guards. "Captain Edmund, you stay." The room emptied except for Camilla, her father, and the captain. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Camilla stood before her father's desk like a defendant awaiting judgment. Finally, King Theodore spoke, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. "Tell me it isn't true, Camilla. Tell me my daughter hasn't been sneaking around like a common servant, meeting secretly with some nobody, risking everything we've worked for." Camilla met her father's eyes. "I cannot tell you that, father, because it would be a lie." "Oh, a chair," unable to hold back her grief any longer. Sobs racked her body, and she didn't care who saw her pain. King Theodore approached and awkwardly placed a hand on her shoulder. "In time, you'll understand this was necessary." Camilla looked up at him through tears. I'll never understand it, Father, and I'll never forgive you for this." The king's hand dropped. He looked old suddenly, burdened by the weight of his choices. Add that to the long list of things I must live with. Captain Edmund, escort the princess to her chambers. She's to remain there under watch until the engagement ceremony. As Edmund gently helped Camilla to her feet, she caught a glimpse of something unexpected in his eyes. Sympathy, perhaps even understanding. The hard military man seemed affected by what he had witnessed. They walked through quiet corridors back to Camilla's chambers. When they arrived, Edmund spoke quietly. "Your Highness, for what it's worth, I believe you truly loved him." Camilla wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know." "I once loved someone I couldn't have," Edmund said, his voice barely audible. "Duty took her from me just as it's taking him from you. The pain does ease with time, though it never fully disappears." Camilla studied the captain's face, seeing him as a human being for the first time rather than just a soldier. What happened to her? She married someone else, someone appropriate for her station. I watched from a distance as she built a life with another man. Eventually, I learned to be content with knowing she was happy, even if it wasn't with me. "I don't think I can be that strong," Camilla whispered. "You're stronger than you know," Edmund replied. "You're your father's daughter, after all. You have steel in your spine even when you feel broken." He bowed formally and left her at her chamber door. Margaret was waiting inside, her face full of concern. She opened her arms and Camilla ran to her, crying like a child. "They found us," Camilla sobbed. "They're sending him away. I'll never see him again." Margaret held her tightly, stroking her hair. "I'm so sorry, my dear. So terribly sorry. What do I do now? How do I survive this?" "The same way women have survived heartbreak for centuries," Margaret said softly. "One day at a time. One breath at a time. You endure because you must." Camilla pulled back, wiping her face. "I have to marry Marcus. I have to pretend to be happy while dying inside." "Not happy," Margaret corrected gently. "Dignified, gracious, royal. You don't have to pretend happiness. Just maintain composure." "I don't know if I can." "You can," Margaret assured her. "You're stronger than your father realizes. And perhaps in time, you'll find ways to make peace with your life." Camilla walked to her window, looking out at the gardens below. Somewhere out there, Thomas was preparing to leave, to start a new life in a strange city. She wondered if he would think of her as often as she would think of him. A terrible thought struck her. "Margaret, what if I run away? What if I leave tonight and find Thomas before he goes? Then what?" Margaret asked practically. "You'd be a fugitive princess. Your father would hunt you down. Thomas would be imprisoned or worse for harboring you. And even if you escaped, you'd spend your life in hiding, in poverty, always looking over your shoulder." Camilla knew Margaret was right, but the fantasy was tempting. "At least we'd be together." "Would you really ask Thomas to give up everything? His work, his future, his safety? Would you drag him into that life?" Camilla sank onto her bed. "No, I couldn't do that to him. He deserves better. And so do you," Margaret said firmly. "You deserve a life of dignity, even if it's not the life you would choose. There's honor in doing one's duty, even when that duty breaks your heart." Through the night, Camilla lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She imagined Thomas traveling through the darkness, putting miles between them. She wondered what he was thinking. If he was as heartbroken as she was, if he regretted ever speaking to her that first day in the library. But she didn't regret it. Despite the pain, despite the loss, she treasured those 6 months. Thomas had given her something precious. The experience of being loved for herself alone. She had felt seen, understood, cherished. For the first time in her life, she had been simply Camilla, not Princess Camilla. As dawn broke, painting her chambers in soft golden light, Camilla made a decision. She would survive this. She would honor her duty to the kingdom. She would marry Prince Marcus and be a good queen. But in the private chambers of her heart, she would keep Thomas's memory alive. She would remember what real love felt like, and that knowledge would sustain her through the difficult years ahead. She rose from bed and began preparing for the day. Her face in the mirror showed signs of crying, but she would cover those with makeup. She would dress in royal finery and wear her crown with dignity. The world would see Princess Camilla composed and graceful. But inside, she would always be the woman who loved Thomas Reed, the scholar with ink-stained fingers and a kind smile. That love would remain her secret treasure, untouched by politics or duty, forever hers alone. 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations and forced smiles. Camilla went through the motions of her daily life like an actress playing a role. She attended dress fittings without complaint, reviewed guest lists without interest, and practiced her engagement speech until the words felt meaningless. Prince Marcus arrived on a bright autumn morning, his entourage filling the palace courtyard with horses, carriages, and servants carrying trunks of gifts. Camilla stood beside her father on the palace steps, watching the procession with a carefully neutral expression. Marcus himself was handsome enough, tall with dark hair and strong features. He wore his royal attire with confidence and carried himself with obvious pride. When he dismounted from his horse and approached the king, his bow was respectful but not subservient. This was a man accustomed to authority. "Your Majesty," Marcus greeted King Theodore warmly. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Prince Marcus, welcome to our kingdom," Theodore replied. "May I present my daughter, Princess Camilla?" Marcus turned to her, his eyes assessing. Camilla saw no warmth in his gaze, only calculation. He took her hand and kissed it formally. "Princess Camilla, your beauty exceeds all reports. I am honored to be your future husband." The words were perfect, rehearsed, empty. Camilla curtsied. "Prince Marcus, welcome. I hope your journey was pleasant." "Adequate," he replied, "though I'm eager to conclude these formalities and return home with my bride." Already he spoke of her as a possession, something to be acquired and transported. Camilla felt a chill but maintained her smile. The days that followed established a pattern. Marcus joined them for formal meals, where he spoke mostly with the king about military matters and trade policies. He showed little interest in Camilla beyond asking perfunctory questions about her skills and accomplishments. When she tried to discuss books or philosophy, his eyes glazed with boredom. One afternoon, Marcus requested a private walk in the gardens with his betrothed. Camilla agreed, knowing she had no choice. They strolled along manicured pathways, servants following at a discreet distance. "You're very quiet," Marcus observed. "Are you always this reserved?" "I'm listening," Camilla replied carefully. "You've been sharing much about your kingdom." "Yes, well, you'll need to know these things. As my wife, you'll be expected to understand our customs and traditions. Some will differ from what you're used to here. I'm willing to learn." Marcus stopped walking and faced her. "Let me be direct, Princess. This marriage is important to both our kingdoms. I expect you to fulfill your duties as queen, produce heirs, maintain proper behavior, support my decisions publicly. In return, you'll have comfort, security, and status. Is this arrangement acceptable to you?" Camilla felt as if he were proposing a business contract rather than a marriage. "You speak of duties and arrangements. Do you have any interest in who I am as a person?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. "I know who you are. You're Princess Camilla, daughter of King Theodore, educated and accomplished. What more is there?" "Everything," Camilla whispered. "There's everything more." "You're being sentimental," Marcus said dismissively. "Romance is for common people who have the luxury of choosing their partners. We are royalty. Our purpose is larger than personal feelings." The words echoed her father's arguments, but somehow they sounded even colder coming from the man she was supposed to marry. Camilla realized with crushing certainty that she would spend her life with someone who would never truly see her, never try to understand her heart. That evening, Camilla excused herself early from dinner, claiming a headache. In truth, she couldn't bear another moment of Marcus's company. She returned to her chambers and found Margaret waiting with a letter. "This arrived for you, Your Highness," Margaret said quietly. "It was delivered to the kitchen by a traveling merchant. No one knows who sent it." Camilla's hands trembled as she took the envelope. There was no name, no seal, just her title written in familiar handwriting. She tore it open, her heart racing. The letter was from Thomas. He had reached the city of Northport, 4 days' journey away. He had found work with a university there, translating manuscripts. He was safe, he was surviving, but every moment away from her felt like dying slowly. He wrote about missing their conversations, about seeing beautiful sunsets and wishing she was beside him to share them. He described walking through Monarchy as and imagining what she would think of the strange fruits and fabrics. He told her about a bookshop he had discovered, full of philosophy texts they would have loved discussing together. But mostly he wrote about loving her, about how that love hadn't diminished with distance, how it sustained him through lonely nights and difficult days. He promised to carry her in his heart forever, regardless of who she married or what path her life took. At the end, he wrote, "I know I shouldn't have sent this. I know it only makes things harder. But I needed you to know that what we had was real. In a world full of obligations and expectations, we found something genuine. That truth can never be erased no matter what happens next. Be strong, my love. Live the life you must live, but never forget that someone out there knows the real you and loves you completely." Camilla pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Margaret sat beside her, offering silent comfort. "He shouldn't have written," Camilla said through her tears. "It makes this so much harder. But aren't you glad he did?" Margaret asked gently. Camilla nodded. "Yes, God help me, yes. I needed to know he still thinks of me." "What will you do with the letter?" Camilla looked at the pages covered in Thomas's careful handwriting. "Hide it, treasure it, read it whenever I feel myself forgetting what real love feels like." She went to her jewelry box and removed a hidden panel in the bottom. Inside was a small space where she kept her most precious possessions: a dried flower from their garden, a book of poetry Thomas had given her, and now this letter. She placed it carefully inside and closed the panel. Over the following days, Camilla forced herself to be more engaging with Prince Marcus. She asked him questions, laughed at his stories, and tried to find some common ground between them. Marcus seemed pleased by her increased attention, interpreting it as acceptance of their arrangement. The engagement ceremony drew closer. Invitations had been sent to nobility across multiple kingdoms. The palace buzzed with activity as servants prepared for the grandest celebration in years. Camilla's wedding gown arrived, a masterpiece of silk and lace that must have cost a fortune. One evening, as Margaret helped her prepare for bed, Camilla confessed her strategy. "I'm going to try to make this work with Marcus. Not love, perhaps, but at least mutual respect, maybe even friendship." "That's wise, Your Highness," Margaret approved. "Many successful royal marriages have been built on less." "Do you think I'm betraying Thomas by trying?" Margaret considered carefully. "I think Thomas would want you to be as happy as possible in your circumstances. Wallowing in misery wouldn't honor what you shared. Making the best of your situation would." Camilla nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what Captain Edmund said, about learning to be content knowing the person you loved was happy, even if not with you. Maybe that's what Thomas and I must do for each other." "Maybe so," Margaret agreed. "Love sometimes means wanting the best for someone, even when that best doesn't include you." The night before the engagement ceremony, Camilla couldn't sleep. She stood at her window looking out at the gardens. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, beyond the city, beyond the horizon, Thomas was looking at the same moon. The thought brought both comfort and pain. She thought about the choice before her. She could continue fighting against her fate, making herself and everyone around her miserable, or she could accept her reality and find meaning within it. She could honor her duty while keeping her love for Thomas sacred and separate. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. She was surprised to find Captain Edmund standing there looking uncomfortable. "Your Highness, forgive the late hour. I have something for you." He handed her a small package wrapped in plain cloth. Camilla opened it to find a book of poetry, the same edition she and Thomas had discussed in the library months ago. "Thomas Reed asked me to give you this before he left," Edmund explained. "He said you would understand its significance." Camilla clutched the book, her eyes filling with tears. Inside the cover, she found an inscription in Thomas's handwriting. "For Camilla, who taught me that true nobility comes from the heart, not the crown. May you find beauty and meaning wherever your path leads. Forever yours, T." "Thank you, Captain," Camilla whispered. "Thank you for this kindness," Edmund bowed. "Sometimes duty and compassion can coexist, Your Highness. I'm learning that even at my age." After he left, Camilla sat with the book, running her fingers over the inscription. This would be her last gift from Thomas, the final tangible connection to what they had shared. Tomorrow she would become officially engaged to Marcus. In 3 months she would be his wife. But tonight, just for tonight, she allowed herself to remember and grieve. She let herself feel the full weight of her loss, the ache of loving someone she couldn't have. Tomorrow she would put on her mask of royal dignity. Tonight she could simply be a woman with a broken heart. The engagement ceremony was magnificent. The grand ballroom glittered with thousands of candles, their light reflecting off crystal chandeliers and gilded walls. Nobility from 5 kingdoms filled the space, dressed in their finest silks and jewels. Musicians played softly as servants moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicacies. Camilla stood beside Marcus on a raised platform, both of them dressed in formal attire that marked them as the evening's focus. Her gown was ivory silk embroidered with gold thread, her hair arranged in elaborate curls and decorated with diamonds. Marcus wore deep blue velvet with his royal insignia displayed prominently. They looked perfect together, like figures from a painting. King Theodore gave a speech about unity, prosperity, and the bright future this alliance would bring. Nobles applauded politely. Prince Marcus's father, King Wilhelm, spoke about tradition and duty. More applause followed. Then Marcus took Camilla's hand and addressed the assembled crowd. "Princess Camilla has honored me by accepting this engagement," he announced. "Together we will rule with wisdom and strength, bringing our kingdoms closer than ever before. I pledge to be a faithful husband and just ruler." The crowd cheered. Marcus turned to Camilla, and following tradition, he placed the engagement ring on her finger. It was a massive diamond surrounded by sapphires, heavy and cold against her skin. They were expected to kiss, sealing their commitment publicly. Marcus leaned in, his lips meeting hers briefly. It was a formal kiss, empty of passion or warmth. When they separated, Camilla saw satisfaction in his eyes. He had secured his alliance. She was now his officially, in front of witnesses from across the realm. The celebration continued for hours. Camilla danced with Marcus, with her father, with various nobles who congratulated her enthusiastically. She smiled until her face ached, thanked people for their well wishes, and played her role flawlessly. No one looking at her would suspect the turmoil beneath her composed exterior. But Margaret noticed. When Camilla finally escaped to a private balcony for air, Margaret followed, bringing water and a shawl against the night chill. "You're doing wonderfully," Margaret said softly. "No one would guess. Guess what?" Camilla asked tiredly. "That I feel like I'm watching someone else's life? That I want to scream? That your heart is breaking," Margaret finished. "But you're surviving it. That takes tremendous courage." Camilla looked at the engagement ring on her finger. "This ring weighs more than my entire dowry. Do you know what Thomas gave me? A book of poetry and his honest thoughts. Which gift means more?" "The one given with love," Margaret replied. "But that doesn't diminish your duty, Your Highness." They were interrupted by a servant announcing that Prince Marcus was looking for his fiancée. Camilla took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and returned to the ballroom. The celebration lasted until dawn, and through it all Camilla maintained her perfect smile. The following weeks brought constant interaction with Marcus and his family. King Wilhelm was a stern man who clearly valued military strength above all else. Marcus's mother had died years ago, leaving him to be raised primarily by tutors and military instructors. It explained much about his personality. Camilla tried to find common ground with her future husband. She discovered he enjoyed chess and challenged him to games. He was a skilled player, strategic and ruthless. Their matches became a regular evening activity, and gradually, a cautious respect developed between them. One evening, after Marcus had won their game, he surprised her by asking, "Are you content with this arrangement, Camilla?" She had grown accustomed to him using her first name, though it still felt strange without any warmth behind it. Content is perhaps too strong a word. Accepting would be more accurate. Honest, Marcus observed. "I appreciate that. Most women would lie and say they were delighted." "Would you prefer a lie?" "No," he admitted. "I'd prefer we understand each other clearly. This marriage serves our kingdoms. If we can also develop mutual respect, that's ideal. But I don't require you to pretend affection you don't feel." "That's surprisingly reasonable," Camilla said. Marcus studied the chess pieces. "My father taught me that clear expectations prevent disappointment. I expect loyalty, discretion, and..." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Sunshine flooded through the cathedral's stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in colors of ruby, sapphire, and gold. Every pew was filled with nobility, dignitaries, and important guests from across the realm. The ceremony would be witnessed by hundreds inside the cathedral, and thousands more gathered in the streets outside. Camilla stood in a private chamber, Margaret making final adjustments to her wedding gown. The dress was even more elaborate than her engagement gown, with a train so long it required 3 attendants to carry it. Her veil was silk so fine it seemed like mist, held in place by a diamond tiara that had belonged to her grandmother. "You look like a queen," Margaret said, tears in her eyes. "Which is fitting, as that's what you'll be." Camilla studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked regal, composed, every inch the perfect royal bride. But inside, her emotions swirled in complicated patterns. She had made peace with this marriage, but that didn't mean it came without cost. "Are you ready, Your Highness?" Margaret asked gently. "No," Camilla admitted, "but I'll do it anyway." Isn't that what being ready really means? Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it? Wise words for a bride, Margaret smiled. Your mother would be proud of you. King Theodore appeared at the door, dressed in full royal regalia. He looked at his daughter with an expression that mixed pride, sadness, and something that might have been regret. "Camilla," he said softly, "you look beautiful." "Thank you, Father." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. So much had passed between them these recent months, wounds that hadn't fully healed. Finally, Theodore spoke. "I know you think me cruel for forcing this marriage. Perhaps you're right. But I want you to know I did what I believed was best, even if it brought you pain." "I know," Camilla replied. "I understand duty, Father. I understand sacrifice. I learned those lessons well." "Too well, perhaps," Theodore said quietly. "I see now that I raised you to be a queen but forgot to let you be a daughter, a person with her own heart and dreams." Camilla felt tears forming but held them back. She couldn't ruin her makeup now. "It's done, Father. We can't change the past." "No," he agreed. "But perhaps we can do better in the future. I hope in time you'll find some happiness with Marcus. He's a good man in his way." "He's a practical man," Camilla corrected. "We've reached an understanding. It's not love, but it's something." Theodore offered his arm. "Shall we? The cathedral is waiting." They processed through the palace corridors, attendants following with Camilla's train. As they approached the cathedral doors, Camilla heard the organ music begin. This was the moment. Once she walked down that aisle, there would be no turning back. The doors opened and Camilla saw the assembled crowd rise to their feet. Marcus stood at the altar, looking imposing in his formal attire. The bishop waited beside him, holding the ceremonial texts. Every eye turned to watch the bride's entrance. Camilla walked slowly, her father beside her, maintaining perfect posture despite the weight of her gown and crown. The aisle seemed endless. Each step took her further from the life she might have chosen, and closer to the life she must accept. Halfway down the aisle, Camilla saw Captain Edmund standing among the guards. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw understanding there. He knew what this cost her, and he respected her courage in paying that price. Finally, they reached the altar. King Theodore placed Camilla's hand in Marcus's. The gesture was symbolic, transferring responsibility from father to husband. Marcus's hand was cool and firm, his expression serious. The bishop began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the cathedral. Camilla heard the words as if from a great distance. She made her vows clearly and firmly, meaning every word even as her heart ached. This was her choice, made freely even if not gladly. She would honor her commitment. Marcus made his vows with equal solemnity. When the moment came to exchange rings, he slipped a golden band onto her finger beside the engagement ring she already wore. She did the same for him, their fingers touching briefly. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the bishop declared. "May your union bring prosperity to both your kingdoms and joy to your hearts." Marcus lifted Camilla's veil and kissed her. It was a longer kiss than at the engagement, meant to be witnessed and remembered. When they separated, the cathedral erupted in applause and celebration. Trumpets sounded. People cheered. They turned to face the crowd, now King Marcus and Queen Camilla united in marriage and duty. They processed back down the aisle together, out into the brilliant sunshine where thousands of citizens had gathered to celebrate. The festivities lasted 3 days. There were banquets, balls, tournaments, and entertainments of every kind. Camilla smiled until her face hurt, danced until her feet ached, and accepted congratulations from endless streams of well-wishers. Through it all, Marcus remained by her side, playing his role as proud new husband. On the final night of celebration, after the last guest had departed and the palace had grown quiet, Camilla and Marcus found themselves alone in the private chambers they would now share. It was an awkward moment. Two relative strangers suddenly bound together for life. "That was exhausting," Marcus said, removing his formal jacket. "I'm glad it's over." "As am I," Camilla agreed, sitting down to remove her uncomfortable shoes. "Though I suppose now the real work begins." Marcus looked at her seriously. I want to say something, Camilla. I know this isn't the marriage either of us might have chosen, but I intend to honor my vows. I will be faithful to you, respectful of you, and as good a husband as I know how to be. Thank you, Camilla replied. I will do the same. Be a good wife, a good queen, a good partner in this enterprise. Is that enough for you? Marcus asked. Partnership without passion? Camilla considered the question carefully. I think passion is overrated. It burns bright but burns out quickly. Respect, trust, shared purpose, these things last. Perhaps we can build something more solid than mere passion. You're wise beyond your years, Marcus observed. I begin to think I'm fortunate in this arrangement, even if it wasn't made from love. They talked late into the night, discovering more about each other than months of formal courtship had revealed. Marcus spoke about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's military legacy. Camilla shared her frustrations with royal life's constraints. They found unexpected common ground in their shared burden of duty. As weeks turned into months, Camilla settled into her new life as Marcus's wife and queen of his kingdom. The palace in Marcus's homeland was different from her childhood home, larger and more austere, built for defense rather than beauty. But Camilla adapted, learning new customs and winning over skeptical courtiers with her intelligence and grace. She and Marcus developed a comfortable partnership. They consulted each other on decisions, supported each other publicly, and maintained separate private lives that intersected at formal occasions. It wasn't the passionate love she had shared with Thomas, but it was something solid and real. One afternoon, 6 months after the wedding, Camilla was reading in the palace library when a servant announced an unexpected visitor. Master Edwin, the head librarian from her father's palace, had arrived requesting an audience. Camilla received him warmly, curious about this unexpected visit. Edwin looked older than she remembered, more frail, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. Your Majesty, he bowed formally. Thank you for seeing me. I come bearing news and a request. Please, Master Edwin, sit. What news brings you so far from home? Edwin settled into a chair with visible relief. I'm retiring, Your Majesty. My eyes grow weak and my hands shake too much for delicate manuscript work. But before I leave my post, I wanted to ensure proper care for the translation project your father commissioned. Camilla felt her heart skip. The translation project? Yes, Your Majesty. Young Thomas Reed's excellent work. He completed the Latin text before his departure, but the Greek manuscripts remain untranslated. I've been searching for someone with his skill and dedication, but such talents are rare. Camilla's mind raced. What happened to Thomas's work after he left? It remains in the library, Your Majesty. Some of the finest translations I've seen in 40 years of service. Your father was so pleased he wanted to commission more, but of course circumstances prevented that. Circumstances, Camilla repeated softly. Yes. Edwin studied her face with the perceptiveness of someone who had spent a lifetime reading between lines. Your Majesty. Forgive an old man's boldness, but I always wondered if there was more to Thomas's sudden departure than official explanations suggested. Camilla considered her response carefully. Master Edwin, some stories are better left unexamined. Indeed, Edwin nodded. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Thomas has achieved remarkable success at Northport University. He's published several papers that are transforming how we understand ancient texts. He's become one of the most respected scholars in the realm. Pride swelled in Camilla's chest, mixed with the familiar ache of loss. I'm glad to hear it. He deserves recognition for his talents. He asks about you sometimes, Edwin said quietly, when I visit Northport on business. Never directly, never inappropriately. But he asks how the royal family fares if everyone is well and happy. I believe he cares deeply about your welfare, Your Majesty. Tears threatened, but Camilla controlled them. Please tell him if you see him again that I am well, that I've found peace in my life, and that I wish him every happiness. I will, Your Majesty. And the translation project? Shall I recommend it be abandoned? Camilla thought for a moment. No, continue seeking a qualified scholar. Those manuscripts deserve proper translation. Knowledge should not be lost because of personal circumstances. After Edwin left, Camilla sat alone with her thoughts. Hearing about Thomas brought memories flooding back with unexpected intensity. She had thought herself healed, but apparently, some wounds never fully closed. That evening, Marcus found her unusually quiet during dinner. Something troubles you, he observed. It wasn't a question. Camilla debated whether to share, then decided honesty served them better than secrets. I received news today about someone from my past, someone important to me before our marriage. Marcus set down his wineglass. The scholar. Camilla looked at him in surprise. You know, I know there was someone. Your father mentioned it when negotiating our marriage terms. He assured me it was resolved that you would honor our union. I chose not to inquire further. Why not? Camilla asked. Because I had my own past, Marcus admitted. There was a woman I cared for before duty required I seek a royal marriage. I understood that we both came to this union carrying previous attachments. What mattered was what we built together, not what we left behind. This revelation surprised Camilla. She had never imagined Marcus as capable of romantic feeling. What happened to her? She married someone else, a merchant in our capital. I made sure she was well provided for, that she wanted for nothing. Sometimes I see her in the markets happy with her family. It brings both pain and comfort. They sat in silence for a moment, two people bound by duty but united by shared understanding of sacrifice. His name is Thomas, Camilla said quietly. And yes, I loved him. I still carry that love, though I've learned to live with it rather than be consumed by it. Does it diminish what we have? Marcus asked. No, Camilla replied honestly. What we have is different, perhaps better in some ways. We chose this with eyes open, built something real from political necessity. There's honor in that. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, a gesture of genuine affection he rarely showed. You're a remarkable woman, Camilla. I didn't expect to respect you as I do, let alone care for you, but I find I do both. As I do you, Camilla replied, squeezing his hand. We've made something worthwhile from an impossible situation. Time continued its steady march. A year passed, then two. Camilla grew into her role as queen, implementing reforms that improved education and literacy throughout the kingdom. She established libraries in smaller towns, ensuring knowledge reached beyond just the wealthy. It was work that mattered, that made a difference. Marcus proved to be a capable ruler, and together they governed effectively. Their kingdom prospered under their joint leadership. They never fell passionately in love, but they developed deep mutual respect and genuine affection. When Camilla gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor, Marcus was tender and attentive in ways that surprised them both. Holding Eleanor, Camilla thought about love's many forms. She had loved Thomas with passionate intensity, a love that burned bright but couldn't survive the realities of their world. She loved Marcus with steady respect, a love built on partnership and shared purpose. And now she loved Eleanor with fierce maternal devotion, a love that demanded everything and gave even more in return. On Eleanor's first birthday, Camilla received a package with no return address. Inside was a children's book of fairy tales beautifully illustrated with an inscription, "For Princess Eleanor, may she grow up knowing that love takes many forms, and all of them matter. With respect and warm regards." The handwriting was Thomas's. Somehow he had learned of Eleanor's birth and sent this thoughtful gift. Camilla held the book close, grateful that he remembered and cared enough to mark this important moment. She read the book to Eleanor that night, her daughter's small hand clutching her finger. As she read about brave princesses and noble knights, about love conquering all obstacles, Camilla smiled at the irony. Real life was more complicated than fairy tales. Love didn't always conquer. Sometimes duty did. Sometimes wisdom required accepting what couldn't be changed. But that didn't make love less real or less valuable. What she had shared with Thomas had been genuine and transformative. It had taught her about her own heart, shown her what it meant to be truly seen and cherished. That knowledge had made her stronger, better able to build something meaningful with Marcus. Years later, when Eleanor was 5 and her brother Alexander was 2, Camilla attended a royal conference in a neutral kingdom. Among the assembled scholars presenting research was Thomas Reed, now Dr. Thomas Reed, recognized throughout the realm for his groundbreaking work in ancient languages. They saw each other across the crowded hall. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then Thomas bowed formally, appropriately, and Camilla nodded gracefully in return. No words were spoken, but everything was said in that brief exchange. He looked well, happy even. The years had been kind to him, adding distinguished gray to his temples and confidence to his bearing. Beside him stood a pleasant-looking woman, presumably his wife, the dean's daughter Edwin had mentioned years ago. That evening, purely by chance or perhaps by discreet arrangement, Camilla and Thomas found themselves momentarily alone on a palace terrace during a break in the conference. "Your Majesty," Thomas said formally, "you look well. Queenship suits you." "And scholarship suits you, Dr. Reed," Camilla replied with equal formality. "I've heard impressive things about your work." "Thank you. And congratulations on your children. The princess and prince are said to be delightful." "They are my joy," Camilla said softly, then dropping formality slightly. "Are you happy, Thomas?" He considered the question carefully. "Yes. Differently than I once imagined, but genuinely. My work fulfills me. My wife understands and supports me. We have a good life. Are you happy?" "Yes," Camilla replied and realized she meant it. "Also differently than I once imagined. But genuinely, Marcus and I have built something solid. My children bring me profound joy. My work as queen matters. I've found meaning and purpose." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who had once loved deeply and now cared from a distance. "Thank you for the book you sent, Eleanor," Camilla said. "It was thoughtful." "I wanted her to have something from me," Thomas admitted. "A connection, however small, to what her mother and I once shared. She loves that book. I read it to her often." "I'm glad." Thomas paused, then said, "Camilla, I want you to know I don't regret anything. Not meeting you, not loving you, not even losing you. You changed my life in ways I can never fully explain. You made me better." "And you made me better," Camilla replied, tears forming despite her efforts to prevent them. "You taught me I deserved to be loved for myself. That knowledge sustained me through very difficult times." "I should return," Thomas said, glancing toward the hall. "My wife will wonder where I've gone." "And Marcus will notice my absence," Camilla agreed. They stood facing each other one last time, two people whose lives had intersected briefly but intensely, leaving permanent marks on both. "Goodbye, Thomas," Camilla whispered. "Goodbye, Your Majesty," he replied. "Be well. Be happy." "You too." He bowed formally and left the terrace. Camilla remained, looking up at the stars, the same stars that had watched over their secret meetings so many years ago. She felt peaceful, grateful for what had been, and content with what was. When she returned to the conference hall, Marcus immediately noticed her red eyes. That night in their private chambers, he asked if she was all right. "I saw Thomas today," she admitted. "We spoke briefly." "And?" Marcus asked gently. "And I realized I love you, Marcus. Not the way I loved him, but just as real. Perhaps more mature, more grounded. We've built a true partnership, a family, a kingdom we can be proud of. I'm grateful for what I had with Thomas, but I'm equally grateful for what I have with you." Marcus pulled her into his arms, a gesture of genuine affection that had become more common over the years. "I love you too, Camilla. You've become far more than a political necessity. You're my partner, my friend, my queen in every sense that matters." They held each other, two people who had started with duty and discovered something deeper. It wasn't the passionate love story Camilla had once dreamed of, but it was something perhaps more valuable, a love built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine care. Years continued to pass. Camilla and Marcus ruled wisely. Their children grew strong and capable, and their kingdom flourished. Camilla never forgot Thomas, but the memory became gentler over time, less painful and more treasured. She kept his letters and the dried flower in her hidden compartment, but she looked at them less frequently. On her 40th birthday, surrounded by her family and achievements, Camilla reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. She had been forced to give up her first love, but she had gained so much in return. A partnership built on truth, children who filled her days with joy, work that mattered, and the satisfaction of knowing she had honored her duties while maintaining her integrity. She thought about the girl she had been at 23, desperate and heartbroken in that abandoned garden. If she could speak to that girl now, what would she say? Perhaps this, that love takes many forms, that sacrifice can lead to unexpected blessings, that duty and happiness need not be enemies, and that sometimes the life we're given, though different from the life we imagined, can still be rich and meaningful and full of grace. Margaret, now elderly but still serving as Camilla's closest confidant, found her lost in thought. "What occupies your mind, Your Majesty?" "I was thinking about how strange and wonderful life is," Camilla replied. "How we can lose what we think we need most and still find happiness." "Wisdom earned through experience," Margaret smiled. The best kind. That night, Camilla held Marcus's hand as they walked through their palace gardens. The stars shone overhead, constant and beautiful. Somewhere in the world, Thomas was looking at those same stars. The thought brought neither pain nor regret, only a quiet gratitude for all the different ways love had shaped her life. She had loved Thomas with passionate intensity. She loved Marcus with steady respect. She loved her children with fierce devotion. And she had learned to love herself, to honor both her duty and her heart, to accept that life rarely follows our plans but can still bring profound meaning. In the end, this was her story. Not the fairy tale she had once imagined, but something more real and perhaps more valuable, a story of sacrifice and strength, of duty and love, of heartbreak that led to unexpected healing. A true story, complex and bittersweet and ultimately triumphant in its own way. And that, Camilla thought as she squeezed Marcus's hand, was enough.